Jojo Moyes is one of Britain's most successful novelists. She writes what some people call women's fiction, though that's not a label she particularly likes herself. Her latest book is called The 1+1. It's a love story, but it's also a novel about the gulf between the haves and the have-nots in modern Britain. We invited her here to Broadcasting House to be the first guest in our new look, Meet the Author studio. Jojo Moyes, this book, I suppose, is a road trip. There's Ed, and there's Jess, and there's Jess's two children, and there's a very large dog, and they take a trip from the south coast of Scotland. Very briefly, Jess is who?
Jess is a single mother. She's a cleaner. She's the kind of person we don't see a lot of in modern fiction. And she's an eternal optimist in the face of events that should really lead her not to be optimistic at all.
And Ed?
Ed is a failed dot-com whiz kid. He's someone who had everything, the world at his feet, and who made a catastrophic error of judgment and is being prosecuted for insider trading.
And the kids?
Tansy is a maths genius. She's an actual prodigy, and she doesn't really fit into a small seaside town because she's too quirky and too clever, and Jess is very worried about what's going to happen to her when she starts secondary school. And
she has this 16-year-old half-brother called Nicky.
Yes, Nicky is the kind of teenager who, on the surface, you think is just a kind of conventional troubled teen, but actually he's somebody who, as it's put, likes neither football nor musical theatre. He likes to wear eyeliner, but he's not necessarily gay. He's just someone who, again, doesn't fit into a town, and he's being persecuted by a local family.
Now, you say Ed is a failed dot-com whiz kid, but at the beginning of the book, he's still quite successful, and he's certainly rich. And one of the things this book is about is that enormous gulf between people who have money, comfortable with money, yes, and those like Jess who struggle every day.
I think one of the things that has been notable to me in the last few years is the utter lack of understanding between the haves and the have-nots. I realised the other day that the most contact that a lot of people in my dad's old street would have with people under the £20,000 income bracket were their cleaners, and that was it. And it worries me, this polarisation. So I wanted to use that as a backdrop for a kind of fictional story, without being a kind of political thing. I just think it was something worth exploring.
But it's very definitely an issue, a contemporary issue, yes. And there are some popular novelists, Jodie Peako springs to mind, who seem to start with an issue, this book is going to be about whatever it might be, yeah, and they build the whole thing around that. Now, is that where you started?
No, I'm not quite that specific. My books tend to come a bit organically. I tend to have 3 or 4 images or ideas that won't leave the front of my head. And the thing that I've learned over the years is that you have to write about the thing that is at the front of your head. And they usually end up kind of congealing in that's a slightly unattractive word, but they end up becoming a book. And that's what I try to do. And in this case, I have always wanted to write a road trip. I just love road trip films and road trip books. But I wanted to do something about this lack of comprehension between the two sides, and what better environment to force two people who don't understand each other's lives together than in a car.
But your previous book is called Me Before You, and that very definitely is an issue book, because the issue there is assisted dying.
But again, I didn't see it as an issue first. In my own case, I had 2 members of my family who required 24-hour care at the time the book was devised. And you can't live with that kind of issue in your family without having it at the front of your mind. But also I heard a news item about a young man who had persuaded his parents to take him to Dignitas. And as a parent, well, frankly, as a human being, I couldn't understand how they would have agreed to do it. And what I think is interesting as a writer is that dissonance between the brain wanting to be able to say, well, this is right and this is wrong, and those situations which don't allow it. And that's the grey area that I like to explore. And yes, so in some ways it's issue-based, but I guess it's more human dilemmas than issues, if you like.
This, I think, is your 12th book. Me Before You was, therefore, your 11th, am I right? Or 10th?
10th, I think.
And you've been very successful, but Me Before You went much further than in terms of success, because first of all, it's going to be made into a Hollywood film, it's the first of your, and secondly, I gather, in Germany, you are now a superstar bestseller, where previously no one had heard of you.
No, I had a publishing deal in Germany many years ago, which pretty much came to nothing, and I'd been quietly dropped. And then I got picked up by Rowohlt, my current German publishers, and Me Before You has, as we speak, been #1 in Germany for